It's 2025, a new year, and the perfect time to turn your business dreams into reality. Maybe you've been tossing around a great idea, but haven't acted yet. Well, Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and make your first sale. With thousands of customizable templates, you don't need coding or design skills. Just drag, drop, and go. Plus, Shopify's social media tools help you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts so you can sell everywhere your customers scroll. Managing your business is easy too. From shipping to taxes to payments, Shopify handles the details on a single dashboard, letting you focus on what really matters: growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. I am so excited about today's guest. We've been talking for a half hour before we even got started. Glen Meek, okay? He's written this book. He's from Vegas, 20-year criminal for the prosecutor's office over there. I think it was a prosecutor's office over there in Vegas, reporter. Wrong numbers, call girls, hackers, and the mob in Las Vegas. Now, I know this story because it happened just as I moved there. So I'm so excited to have this. You can also find my Glen A. Meek on YouTube. Got a YouTube channel. And this guy's done stories about Barry Seal, he was telling me, and Jeff Garman with the Vegas guy, reporter who got killed. So Glen Meek, are you there?
I am here, Ed. Very happy to be on your program. Would like to make one quick comment, not necessarily a correction, but I was actually investigative reporter in Las Vegas for about 30 years. During a short period, I took a brief hiatus from reporting and worked as a criminal defense investigator. So I was working on behalf of the defense,
Gotcha.
As opposed to the prosecutor's office. But I was actually a staff investigator with the federal public defender. So I learned a lot about how the justice system works. And, I probably deconstructed hundreds, if not thousands, of police cases. And essentially, did my best to poke holes in them when I could find a place to poke them. But so I do have extensive experience both in, journalistic investigation and criminal defense investigation.
And KLAS TV for how many years?
Just a couple of years at KLAS. When I first started looking into this story regarding this weird intersection of organized crime, traditional mob-type organized crime, and cybercrime, I was working for the ABC affiliate, which I believe is KTNV TV still there in Las Vegas.
This story with the hackers, what year was this?
It all started around 1997, 1998, when the internet was pretty new. And, at the time, the cops, the FBI, federal investigators knew very little about hacking. The people that knew about hacking were the young kids who were on their computers, who had grown up with computers. So they were miles ahead of the, both ahead of organized crime and ahead of the FBI at the time. And suddenly you have this really strange intersection of supposedly computer hackers getting involved with the sex industry in Las Vegas, overlaid by an FBI investigation and an alleged attempt by the Mafia to come in and try to find the hacker and make the hacker work for them in a sort of, if you'd like to continue breathing type situation, right. You might want to start doing what you're doing for us.
Well, give the audience an idea. Back in those days, the Las Vegas Yellow Pages was about 5 inches, okay? And 75% were these escort service ads, right?
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
In fact, it was really funny. To do a little promotional work for the book, I went down to the library, and I don't know if you know this or not, but in the Las Vegas library, you can find the old phone books. And sometimes I used to go down there just to see if, you could find people like Oscar Goodman, he's a former mayor, but also was a lawyer for a lot of these mobsters. And, just see if you can find their old phone number when they were in the book in those days, right?
Right.
I pulled some of these phone books from that era, 1997, 1998. 134 full-page ads, essentially for escort services. It was incredible. And every one of these ads cost about $3,000 a month. So you can see that just the advertising aspect of this was in the millions of dollars. And it was, it actually got so out of hand that, people started complaining to the Clark County Commission. They're saying, oh my God, my kid goes in there, he's looking, to order a pizza, and he's got, all these, different coquettish college, nymphs, and, these advertisements for, blonde Asian MILFs who want to meet you tonight. And, they started complaining about all these ads. And eventually, they made him take the salacious pictures of the women with their glossy lips and all that stuff out of the phone book. But the joke at the time was, let your fingers do the walking meant let your fingers do the street walking, because these places were, not merely escort services. The whole idea was that many of them, if not most or all, were really fronts for out-call prostitution, or essentially fronts for call girls.
Yeah, it's funny. You sent me that little clip, and the girl is saying, "We're not here to dance, We come here to dance."
Yeah, that was what really demonstrated it. Yeah. The Metro Police used to do a lot of these stings, where they would just pose as a guy coming into Las Vegas for a convention, and they would call a number for one of these escort services that were in all these booklets that are passed out along the Las Vegas Strip. And so what would happen is, and then this woman would come up supposedly to dance, and they were never there to dance. And in this particular case, it was captured on an undercover camera. I mean, she just laid the whole thing out. I mean, she more or less, first thing she said, we're not even here to dance. And then she started to talk about how much it was going to cost him, the client, and how much she had to give to the agency for the referral and all this other stuff. She just laid the whole thing out. But in sting after sting after sting in these hotel rooms, the police always, I don't know that they ever, after hundreds of these, ever had one where the woman really came there and said, yeah, I'm here to dance. That's not what it was about.
Yeah, I think the deal was, too, they would ask you how much, what hotel you were staying in. They would know how much the night for a room there was, and then that was the price they would quote you, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Hey, what about, tell the audience about those clip joints they used to have, where the cab drivers would take you to those totally nude places, and then you'd go in there and they'd beat the crap out of you and take all your money here, and then the cab would be waiting for you out front.
Just genuine, up front clip joints. Or some of them were these bee drinking things, where the women would pretend like they're really interested in you as long as you kept buying them, $200 bottles of, cold duck, which was sold for $1.98 at the 7-Eleven down the street. But then there were actually some fairly, high-class strip clubs out there that were doing allegedly the same thing. And there was one particular one which was very well known for all the organized crime figures who were connected to it. And eventually that finally went out of business, but it was remarkably successful. And every time somebody came in to film a movie in Las Vegas, you would see all sorts of, Hollywood A-listers down there getting their lap danced.
I've been to Crazy Horse. Yeah, it was a cool club, yeah. Crazy. They had three of them, back in when I used to come back there in the 80s, it was a much smaller joint. But anyway.
But yeah, the whole thing was the sex industry was huge in Las Vegas, particularly in the late 90s. And in this particular phase of the sex trade in Las Vegas, what had happened is they had commercialized it to such a great degree that it was really hard for law enforcement to do anything about it, because these services would, all of the women that worked for these services were strictly contract employees. So they weren't anybody that actually, were employed by the agency. And so if one of them got arrested, the cops would say, see, you're running prostitutes out of your agency. And they would say, no. In fact, everyone that comes to work for us signs this paper. It says, I will not, do anything other than dance. Well, of course, everybody, signs that paper. It's worthless. It's only between the so-called dancer or, ultimately the prostitute and the owner of the services. So it meant nothing. But it insulated the owners from the police, because these guys were not traditional pimps in that traditional sense.
Oh yeah, huge business. Basically a phone operation, and then you said they had drop boxes too, where the girls would drop the money.
Oh yeah, they would come drop off the money, go on another call. And it was really funny, like all these pamphlets were handed out on the strip. They had these news racks full of these things, and people on the strip would open a news rack, pull it out. Like I said, it would say, coquettish college co-eds want to meet you tonight, or, blonde Asian MILFs, or whatever the case may be. And, each one phone line went to a different phone bank. It was one bank of phones. It was the same place. One place might have 15, 20, 25 lines. And when particular light would come on, they go, oh, yeah, okay, this guy's looking for a blonde, or this one guy's looking for an exotic-looking woman. And it was mostly women. There were a few agencies that catered to men. But, back in the day, in the 90s, late 90s, it was primarily, men that they were targeting in terms of clientele.
You know what? It was so sad too. These newbies would come out to Vegas, and they're flipping through those magazines, those free magazines, right? And they're picking out the best picture, the girl that they want, the girl of their dreams, and they think they're gonna get that girl.
Oh, that actually was a separate story that I did back in the day. I covered this industry pretty closely, and it was really funny because what happened was I had been doing a lot of stories about this industry and also some of the organized crime connections. Okay, so I get a call one day. And it's from the head of security for Playboy magazine. And again, this is the beginning of the internet, right? So yeah, all these pamphlets, these booklets advertising these various quote dancers or outcall quote entertainers who are going to be doing more than entertaining. All of these booklets had these pictures of these women, and all it was pictures pirated from Penthouse, Playboy, and all the mainstream men's magazines. They weren't the real women at all. And so Playboy came out, and the guy who went to have lunch with me, we had lunch, he was like, we want to go after these guys civilly with a lawsuit to get them to stop because they're pirating our pictures. And what had happened was Hugh Hefner had been in Las Vegas with an entourage, and I think her name was Kimberly Conrad. Anyway, Hefner was married at that time to one of the Playmates. I believe it was Kimberly Conrad. And they were walking down the street, and one of these little pamphlet vendor guys comes up to him, hands him a pamphlet. He opens it up, and there's his wife's picture under one of these, call me, I'll be over at your hotel room tonight and give you the time of your life advertisements. And I guess he just supposedly hit the roof, so this is enough. Called up his lawyers, called up his security people, said, put these guys out of business. And eventually, I don't know if they actually filed a lawsuit or whether they just sent a bunch of cease and desist letters. But they ended up stopping that. And later, in fact, even today, maybe, I haven't seen one of these pamphlets in a while, they started saying, okay, the person you see in this ad is the actual entertainer or is one of our actual entertainers. But the threat from Playboy ended up stopping that from happening. But that was another part of this thing, was just this wide open intellectual property piracy that was going on in order to, advance the cause of this sexual industry.
Well, you figure in for a penny, in for a pound, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Copyright infringements. Yeah. Well, because this story, as we get into the story, they bring in this guy called the Aspirin, who would fix mafia headaches, and he would use a power drill, a cordless drill to torture his victims.
Yeah, that was the reputation that he had, and of course the co-conspirators were caught on wiretaps, unaware that they were being recorded by the FBI, talking about this guy, and that's what they say. They called him Vinny the Aspirin because when the mob has a headache, they send this aspirin to eliminate that headache.
What was the organized crime connection to all this? Did they control everything going through there, or just part of it?
Here's how the whole thing came down. And it's really funny because I got onto this as a journalist in one way, and the FBI, they opened their investigation through a completely different channel, and we ended up meeting in the middle at the same place, okay? So what happened with me was, I had, as I indicated, had covered this industry and some of the alleged organized crime connections. And one day, a woman shows up at the television station where I worked and asked to see me if she could talk to me. So I said, yeah, sure. So we go into a little conference room there, and she says, I run a little service. She had like 4 or 5 lines, and she had, half a dozen young women working for her, or not working directly for her, but, she would dispatch. as contractors to, different outcall situations whenever the tourists would call. And she said, I don't know if you're aware of this, Mr. Meek, but something is happening. Someone is hacking into the phone system so that when I would usually get 10 to 12 calls a night, okay? And this is big money. These people are making probably, anywhere from $1,500, $3,000 on a call. So 10 of those calls, you're making maybe 30, there's maybe at least split among different people, $30,000 a night, maybe more. So she said, suddenly all my calls just stopped. I would get maybe one or two on some nights, which were normally slow nights. They would have the same number, maybe 4 or 5. Friday nights or nights when we had a fight in town or some major basketball game, something like that in town. When I used to get 25, 30, 50 calls, I'm getting 5, 10. And I shouldn't be, because there's more hotels being built, there's more rooms on the Strip, there's more things going on. And I talked to my other people in the industry, because they had almost like a industry protective association kind of thing. It was really more of a social circle of quasi pimps, madams. But all these people in the industry used to get together and talk. And as they were doing that, everybody else started saying the same thing. Hey, that's happening to me. I thought I was crazy. I thought I just had to increase my advertising. I don't know what's going on. But everybody's saying the same thing. Calls were dropping off, and they were doing it almost like somebody was doing it selectively. And so they came up with the idea that what was happening was someone was tapping into the phone system and either triggering the call forwarding systems so that if you were, let's say, calling Swinging Susie's escort service, right? The call would not go to Swinging Susie's. The call would be automatically at the phone company through some sort of hacking situation, diverted to Sexy Sally's. And so Sexy Sally, let's say, has employed a hacker to do this, to turn on and off the call forwarding features at odd times. And so, Sexy Sally's gets all the calls. And then they would turn it off and you'd start getting your own calls again. And of course, by the time anybody in the phone company could look at it, it wasn't being done anymore. They knocked off for the night. And frankly, at that time, like I said, the hackers were way ahead of the security people, both within the telephone companies and certainly within the FBI and other law enforcement organizations that was just now starting to look at hacking as a real, sort of cybersecurity threat. And so that's what happened. She came to me. I ended up doing a story on it, just, because I told her, I said, that's a hell of a story. Yeah. But, why does, Mr. and Mrs. America, you think are going to want to turn on our nightly newscast and find it that interesting? And she said, because, it's us now. And you know why it's us now? Because people think we're a quasi or non-legitimate industry. So nobody cares about us. When they start doing taxi cabs and pizza places and everybody's phone system starts getting hacked. And when real money starts going out from, completely total 100% legitimate businesses, then everybody's going to care about the security of the phone system.
I never even considered that. You're right. Limousine services, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's always how it works initially.
Yeah.
Particularly with organized crime. They always target. It's just like Henry Hill said in Goodfellas. The outfit is a police department where people can't go to the police.
Right.
And that was another reason why she came to me, because I said, why don't you go to the police? Because A, they don't take us seriously. They won't take us seriously. But if you put a story on it, they might start taking us seriously, and then maybe, you can bring it up to the feds or something, because you said the local cops, they were fighting war with these guys. They were at odds anyway. The local cops were doing all these sting operations. They had no sympathy for escort services, okay? And so, yeah, that's how you always do it. You attack somebody who can't go to the cops.
But Glenn, was it ever confirmed that it was some type of hacking, or that they just had a friend in the phone company?
Nope. In fact, nothing Nothing. To me, that's what's amazing about this story.
Well, you know what? I think I know how they did it
day.
I think I know how they did it. Because you have those caller ID spoofs where you could call up someone's phone number, spoof their number, and get it and listen to their voicemail messages. That was very popular back in those days, 90s, 98. So I guess you could probably go in there with the caller ID spoof and go in there and forward the calls, too.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, this is what's really interesting. At the same time this was going on, two very interesting people happened to live in Las Vegas. Okay, one was a guy by the name of Kevin Mitnick, who went on the run during this period. He's one of the most famous hackers in history. In fact, when he got out of jail for hacking, he moved to Henderson, Nevada, and opened a cybersecurity organization from his old stomping grounds of Las Vegas. While he was a fugitive to stay ahead of the FBI, he was laundering his phone calls through the Las Vegas phone system, and that's a documented fact. People can get online and look at Kevin Mitnick, and you'll see that he admitted that he laundered his phone calls through the Las Vegas phone system. Also at that time, there was a woman by the name of Susan Headley. She went by the handle of Susie Thunder. She was an escort and a hacker. So she knew the escort industry and she knew hacking, and she and Mitnick were both friends. Now, I'm not saying either or both were involved in this. There was a guy who owned an escort service, though, who was absolutely convinced that they were either behind it or knew who was behind it, or had even shown somebody how it could be done, and then those people had sort of, picked up the ball and run with it. But, Susie Thunder is still alive. Kevin Mitnick died, I think, a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, he was fairly young. I think he was 59 years old, but he died of cancer.
Well, you know who's still alive? This is interesting. John Draper, who was Captain Crunch, the phone freak.
Oh, yes, right.
He lived in Vegas, too.
With the
Dude, he lived in Vegas, too.
All those folks, they were all together.
Yeah.
And Vegas was a hotbed, both for hacking and those types of individuals, and also for the sex industry. So, it was this crazy convergence, all at the time when the internet was just starting to take off. And again, police, prosecutors, they didn't know anything about how to trap these guys. They didn't even know what was possible. They didn't know the capabilities of these folks. So you have that going on. Now, that's how I got into it. Interestingly enough, the FBI got into it through a completely different channel. They got into it through another escort service operator, this guy by the name of Tony Nastasi. And Tony Nastasi had run a successful, escort service, or whatever you want to call it, out-call entertainment service in New York. He was looking to expand into Vegas because a lot of people were in those days, because Vegas was the fastest growing metropolitan region in the country. And of course, you have those 134 phone book ads. That tells you somebody's making money, because if they can afford those as ads, just think of how much money they're actually generating. So he starts to open a service here. He gets arrested for pandering by the Las Vegas Metro Police. Now, he claims that the police more or less told him, hey, you got to sort of scratch our back if you want to operate this town. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, essentially, he was alleging that they were looking for, a piece of his action.
Shakedown.
A shakedown, exactly. That's what he alleged. So he goes to the FBI and says, by the way, back in New York, I used to help you guys out. You can call this guy. He can vouch for me. Because he did have he was one of those, when you're in this kind of business in New York, you're going to be rubbing elbows with real mob guys, okay? So he had some bona fides in that department. So then FBI says, well, you know what? We've been wanting to get in these services. Not so much for the prostitution angle, because as a federal thing, that's prostitution is legal in this state. Not legal in Las Vegas, though. All of this was actually illegal in Las Vegas and Clark County surrounding Las Vegas. The prostitution was only legal in brothels in smaller counties. So the money was really in Las Vegas, where it was still illegal. But still, because it was legal in other counties in Nevada, the feds didn't really want to go so much after that. They were interested, though, in human trafficking, and they were interested in any kind of drugs that might be smuggled through there, and they were interested in money laundering and anything that might be emboldening organized crime. particularly since, the mob had essentially been run out of the casinos, and they were looking at, hey, now where's the mob going? One of their other traditional routes, which is what? The sex industry, the sex trade, whether it's prostitution or, strip clubs or what have you. So they were very interested in what this guy had to say. So they said, hey, look, would you let us put a agent in your escort service, and you can pretend he's your manager. And then you can introduce him to all these other escort services and all these other people. And he can start to, be part of the industry and put feelers out and sort of see what's going on. And this guy goes, yeah, okay, you can do that. So for the first time, probably, and I'm sure it's last time, the FBI was essentially in league. I mean, they were partners in an escort service.
Well, didn't they also, too, own one of those brothels, too? They went and took over one of those brothels, and they kept running it?
That I don't know. But here, they were definitely, this guy was essentially on their payroll, right? And he had employees who were on his payroll. And so, even one of the FBI agents that I talked to for the book said, it was very, 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 it would never fly today. But, you can make a very valid argument that the FBI was certainly in league with this guy who was running escort services in New York, for sure. And then he's got his Vegas operation, which they have one of their agents acting as the manager. So that's how they started that. But as once that started off, this guy Nastasi, as I mentioned, he gets part of this social circle of other operators, right? Other escort service operators. And he's talking with them. And this one guy starts talking. His name is Cristiano DiCarlo, sort of a young Turk, young guy. He's got an escort service. He starts telling Nastasi, hey, are you getting hit with these call stealing things yet? He goes, I don't know. I just got here, I don't know. I haven't really established, how much I'm supposed to get every week or whatever. Well, this guy says, well, no, they're out there. There's somebody out here hacking the phones. I'm a victim of it. But I know some people in New York, you know what I mean? People who can help us. Some of these friends of ours, friends of mine type situations. And so essentially, according to the FBI, this guy, Chris DiCarlo, had reached out to a man who was either connected to or an associate of one or more of the major crime families in New York, either the Gambinos or the Bananos, or possibly both. And this guy's name was Mario Stefano. And so Mario Stefano says, okay, we're going to send a crew out there from New York, New Jersey, and actually someone came from Tampa, Florida. I'm going to send a crew out there to stop this call stealing that's victimizing our friend there in Vegas. And we're going to tell this guy essentially, hey, stop it, knock it off. Now you're going to do that. Whatever you're doing, you're going to do it for us. Okay. So that was the plan, according to the FBI. Was that this organized crime crew would come to Las Vegas. They would track down the hacker, and then they would give this hacker kind of make him an offer he can't refuse. Work for us or else. And that's what they were going to do, to essentially kind of take over the escort service industry in Las Vegas. And that's where everything started. And that's when the FBI heard that. Then they started tapping everybody's phones. They found out who the crew was coming from. One guy came from New Jersey, two came from Tampa. And one of those guys was this guy, Vinny the Aspirin. And over these wiretaps, you hear them talking about him and how, he's going to get rid of these headaches we have in Vegas. Vinny the Aspirin, he'll eliminate that
with his drill. That
was the cordless drill, which they actually found when they eventually took these guys down. And you heard, I sent you some material. I don't know if you could be able to use any of it, but they caught them talking about trying to find this guy, because that was the thing that was really funny about this. You've got people using old-fashioned organized crime style techniques. But nobody, neither the cops nor the alleged wise guys, any of these people really knew enough about computers to figure out, who was doing what to when. But there was a guy, curiously enough, his name was Charles Coveney. And Charles Coveney was a wiretap expert, and a computer expert, and he had his own mob connections. He had actually started out in New Jersey. He was from New Jersey. And he was a wiretap expert, but he had worked both sides of the streets. He had done work for the feds. He'd done work for local police departments, black bag operations, and then went out to Las Vegas. And according to him, I ended up interviewing him years later. He became friendly with a guy who used to have his own organized crime connections. And that was Benny Binion at Binion's Horseshoe. Right. And so he started, I was told, living at Binion's Horseshoe in what was essentially an unlisted number. His room was had an unlisted number. He lived in a room at Binion's Horseshoe, or so I was told. But, he became friends with him and actually helped him start getting the World Series of Poker to be something that was eventually carried on, networks and ESPN, that sort of thing.
Now, from watching on TV, I'm under the impression that they were going to drill this guy in a shower in a hotel room.
No, it was. They actually had. There was a guy. They had zero. It was like it was like the Keystone Cops. They had zero luck trying to find this guy. Okay, zero. And so what they decided to do was they knew a guy that knew a guy. Okay, there was a guy that was. He knew some of the people in the computer industry.
Okay,
and he was a little supposedly had also known some people in the organized crime community, and so they said we're gonna bring this guy to the office of this Chris DiCarlo, who was the aggrieved escort service owner who had reached out to the guy in New York. Okay, so they bring him to his office and they start working on him. During that period of time, one of the guys in the crew picks up a phone and calls this Tony Nastasi, right, who was the FBI informant, and starts telling him, "Oh, this is great. We're going to get the info out of this guy. Vinny's got his drill out. Oh, hey, I hear it. I don't hear any screams yet. So he's probably just putting it up next to his head. So this Nastasi goes, oh, okay. Well, you don't want to have a package you got to get rid of later, okay? Oh no, we're just, we're not going to have a package to get rid of, but we're going to get this guy to talk." So then he goes, okay, well, yeah, well, call me back later. Tell me what he says. At that point, Nastasi hangs up the phone, picks up the phone, calls the FBI. I don't know if the FBI was actually monitoring that phone call live. I believe they were. But if they weren't, Nastasi tells the FBI, hey, you need to listen to that recording because they got this guy in a room with a drill, and Vinny the aspirin is about to cause a headache if he doesn't get rid of a headache. And so the feds go, oh my God, we can't let them drill this guy. It's okay if he's getting grilled, but not if he's getting drilled. So they burst in. Well, yeah, but anyway, they burst into the room while all this is going on, and they arrest everybody. And then the thing goes on for months and months and months. But because they were afraid that this guy was going to get his head drilled, they had to pull the whole operation down. And though they got convictions from everybody, they never, ever figured out whether this was really going on or not. Now, like I said, I had a chance to talk to the guy that the crew from New York had thought was the mastermind behind this plot, right? And he said he had nothing to do with it. And he said he believed it was happening, though, because as a computer expert, he was almost, plus he knew all these people in this industry. And he said, no, it was happening, but it wasn't happening the way they thought. He thought what was going on was that there was a group of guys who worked for the major hotels, most of the major hotels, right? And what they did was they serviced the PBX units, the switchboards for the hotels. And he said you could have a small device. You put it in the switchboard. You just program it with all the numbers for all the escort services. And you can get that from the county because each of these services has a phone number and it has to be registered with the county in order for them to have a business license. So you can get all those numbers, program it in this little device, put that in the hotel switchboard. And so every time this guy wanted to call escort service A, the switchboard in the hotel would switch it to escort service B. And so B would send a woman up, okay? And escort service A never got the call they were supposed to get.
Okay, you see, now that makes sense because
Doesn't it?
Yeah, because I'm sitting here saying, okay, look, if I'm trying to figure out who's picking up these calls, I'm just going to call my own phone number 10 times a day and see who picks up. If I'm not picking it up, you know what I mean? Or if it's me and Glenn, and I'll be calling your number. If you're not picking up, if some XYZ escort service picking up, then we know who's doing it, right? Boom. But you can't rent a hotel room every day, right? And call over there.
No, it's possible you could, from some of the actual phone freaks that I talked to were actually good at this.
Right.
There were ways to do that. In fact, one of the guys I talked to was an ex-phone freak. His name was Polson. And he actually had gotten into trouble in Los Angeles doing the same thing. What happened was vice cops in L.A. had shut down a bunch of these services, right, pursuant to court orders. Well, the problem was these services were shut down, but their ads were still live in the phone book because they didn't put another phone book out for another year, okay? So what he did was he had a friend that had an escort service, and he reconnected all those numbers, but just had those calls forwarded to his friend's escort service. So even though that service was out of business that had the real number, anybody who comes into town, picks up the phone book, calls that escort service, it should be dead, but he had reactivated the number and sent that call to his friend's service. So he had actually done something like that through a phone company hack.
And that is so brilliant, like who would think of that? Why can't we have people like that curing cancer instead of being in the escort business?
And you know what's really funny? I mean, you've been there, of course, and lived there.
Yeah.
Always, whenever they would have Comdex, which was like the computer, the big computer convention for, computer nerds. Yeah. They used to have also what they called sex decks, where where they would have a giant convention for, pornographers and strippers and everything else. And for some reason, computer nerds are also always interested in pornography and, strip clubs and all this other stuff. So I don't know. The two industries have always been sort of interrelated for some reason.
Glenn, I was in the beeper and cellular phone business in Staten Island, okay?
Right.
When I went to the first Consumer Electronics Show convention in Vegas, I go to the Sands, and I see this big line of people going downstairs. And there's a paper sign on the door that says adult software. I walked through that door. It was Caligula.
Oh, absolutely.
All the porn sites and women walking around and, my stripper poles everywhere. And, oh, my God. But that's where the bar was, too, so I had to go down there like every half hour.
Well, naturally, yeah. It's just research,
So now, did they ever catch did this stop happening? Did they catch the guy who came up with the scheme? Or what's going on?
Well, that's what's really interesting. Theoretically, it did stop. It just kind of, the whole thing kind of petered out once it became public. Once the FBI arrested these guys, all the publicity came out, it just kind of went away. But at the same time, cellular phones started being used. People started then using the internet to make their hookups. So the phones, that was really the last gasp of the phone system being used for, hookups between, sex workers and their customers. It's all become, internet heavy. And in fact, one of the guys that they suspected might have been involved, or that some of the escort services said, we're doing really poorly. This guy's doing great. We think he's the guy that hired the hacker to steal our calls. We think he's stealing these calls. Well, this guy was really the first one to go on the internet and make the services of his company's services available to clients over the internet. And so everything was changing then. People were going to cell phones. They weren't calling from the hotels anymore, okay? Right. So that's another thing. If it was happening in the hotels, they're not calling in the hotels. They were using their own cell phone. But it was interesting because one of the things, I forgot to mention this earlier, that made me agree to do the story originally that I did with the quasi-madam that came to see me. She had how she got onto this to begin with. She had a guy come to her office, which was like in one of those little strip malls, where the like the small engine repair shops are and all that stuff, like right on Valley View there. Guy shows up, he's hopping mad. She goes, "What can I do for you, sir?" He says, "You can give me my effing Rolex back and my money too." And she goes, well, I know what you're talking about. He says, well, yeah, I called your place. I looked it up. I went down to the county, found out that this number comes to your business. I called your service, and you sent a woman over to my room. And, of course, she said, oh, before we get started, I need you to go in there and take a nice hot shower for me. Well, while he's in there taking a nice hot shower, she's taking all of his money and his Rolex. It's laying there, on the bedstand. And then she vanishes. So my quasi-madam says, well, let me check my records. We'll see what happened. So the guy brought and gave her a copy of his hotel folio, okay? In those days, when you made a local call, at a lot of these hotels, that call was on your folio, okay? Because you were charged for it.
Yeah, you used to be charged for every single call out of those hotels. It was a fortune.
Yeah. And so I think there's probably hotels that have only, I mean, you may have hotels now you can't even call out on, but you can call the front desk for it. But anyway, this was, again, when people were just starting to get cell phones, too. All these things were happening at the same time. So, she looks at it and sees that, yeah, he called her number. She goes, I was working that night. She gets her phone girl. They open their books. We didn't, that was one of those nights we didn't get a call. We did not send anybody there. And, he takes off. Well, there's nothing he can do because it's just like we talked about earlier. He can't go to the cops because if he goes to the cops, he's got to explain to his wife and his boss while he was on a business trip that he was trying to, get a hooker to come up to his, hotel room. So he was not in a position where he could go and tell the cops and make a complaint. Okay. So anyway, he goes storming out, but she had the hotel receipt. He left it, and she showed it to me. And it was definitely one of her lines, one of her numbers. Now, that could have been just like what the computer expert that the alleged mob-connected guys thought had happened. That might have been a situation where this guy was in this hotel room, this big hotel. He called down, and this little device in the in the PBX unit down there, the switchboard, realizes he's calling this one service and then switches the call to another service. And of course, that other service gets the call. Somebody goes in there and steals the Skype line. Who are they going to go to? Even if the guy decided to make a complaint to the police, which he wasn't going to do. I mean, what do? They have the number of the wrong service. That's all they have.
We're talking to Glen Meek, and you can find him on YouTube at Glen A. Meek on YouTube there. We're telling all these kind of stories. And the book we're talking about is Wrong Numbers, Call Girls, Hackers, and the Mob in Las Vegas. So, Mr. Glen Meek, when you see this hotel phone bill, do you trot down to that hotel and ask for the head of security, hey, what's going on here? These calls were made from your hotel, but they were hijacked?
No, I didn't, and I probably should have. At that point, I think we were all thinking it had something to do with the phone company, and I did call the phone company, and the phone company, hey, it's not us. And you would have thought they would have said, hey, maybe you ought to check with the PBXs, because nobody really realized that the PBXs were separate from the phone company. But they were. And the people that serviced the PBXs in some of these hotels at that time were different. They were different companies. So I wasn't even aware of that at that time. So, no, I didn't. I should have, though. And I had to do again, knowing what I know now, I would have.
Well, I tell you, the book's got great reviews, man. And my friend in Ireland I was telling about who read it says, hey, get this guy right away. So great stuff there. Wrong Numbers, Call Girls, Hackers, and the Mob in Las Vegas. What other kind of Vegas stories did you work on?
Oh, my gosh. I did a little bit of everything. What was really funny is that when I first got there, I was told, you're going to get the court beat, and you're also getting the atomic beat. So there's an atomic beat. I was probably the only, or one of maybe 2 or 3 television reporters, in America, whose beat was the nuclear test site. So they were still testing atomic weapons back in those days. So, I used to go out and I was actually on the test site when they did a joint nuclear detonation that was measured with the Russians. The Russians had been allowed on the site under, strict security. but they were allowed to set up their test equipment to measure the yield, so that theoretically we would all have a better idea of each other's nuclear capabilities in order to keep the peace. But that was one of some of the things I looked at. The Binion murder case that involved again goes back to this Binion's Horseshoe Casino family.
Yeah, Sandy Murphy and
Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish. Yeah.
What's going on with them? Are they still around?
Boy, that's a good question. She, I think, is living kind of just a normal life down in Southern California. I think he went back to Montana. He was in the construction business. I think he may have returned to that. They're keeping pretty low profiles now, which is interesting. But that was one hell of a case. Originally they were charged with murder, convicted of murder, got new trials, and then they weren't convicted. They were found not guilty of murder. I can't remember if there were some lesser charges. I think Tabish got a lesser charge. She may have been acquitted on all counts. I don't remember. But that was one whale of a story. Unfortunately, I was there for the mass shooting.
That was
from the hotel tower.
And I got so many crackpot people contacting me about that with all their theories of Laurel Loomer. But the thing about the Binion case, I think my favorite part of that Binion trial was when they had Ted Binion's drug dealer on the stand, and the cry-on underneath his name is Ted Binion's drug dealer.
Right.
As a prosecution witness. What did you make of that trial? Yeah. What do you think? I think they kind of did a job on Sandy. What do you think?
I have a hard time on that one because I know the prosecutor very well. He and I have known each other for many, many years. Obviously, there are a lot of people who think that they did it. I didn't like the way they presented the case, again, because I have some experience now as a criminal defense investigator. And I think it's really, I get nervous when people have two different theories of the murder. You know what I mean? I think, hey, if you got a theory and it fits, fine. But it was either smothered or he was burked or he overdosed or pick one and pick a theory and go with it. So I think there was a lot of mud thrown, where a lot of some mud stuck. But I will tell you this, having looked at the evidence, I actually interviewed Senator Murphy during that case.
Okay.
Two people couldn't have done a better job of trying to frame themselves. Not like they were actively trying to frame themselves, but they're having this romance, they're keeping the romance secret. The guy's got a drug problem, everybody knows that. And then as soon as he's dead, people are out there trying to, dig up the gold and silver that wasn't theirs. And that's more Tabish than Murphy, but all those things. They're talking to people, supposedly in California about, selling the gold, all these things that's going on that just look, and again, they are circumstantial.
And there's no doubt they cleaned him out. Yeah, they cleaned him out after his death. They even left one dime there, a silver dime. And
it was like a silver dollar or something. And that was supposedly also something that was like in the old days was like a Sicilian message type thing.
But the thing is, but they could have found him dead. He overdosed. Okay, well, let's clean the joint out. Let's take what's not nailed down.
He probably did. He may have overdosed. As of this point, no one's convicted of his murder. But like I said, there was so much circumstantial evidence. It just looked so bad. The guy's got a drug problem, but they're checking in these hotels under, assumed names and stuff like that. And, again, the whole going out there to the vault, digging it up, saying, it was his final wishes. And particularly Tabish, and I've interviewed him too. But they did a lot of things that really made themselves, that really painted themselves in a corner. And so, and that's one of the things, when I would talk to clients as a, criminal defense investigator, you got to be very careful what you say. Don't get on this, phone here and that's being recorded in the jail. I don't know how many times we had really good cases until we got the phone calls from the jail, what they said to their spouses or their friends or, telling people to get rid of evidence and things of that nature. So,
Well, yeah, but they talk in code.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they're gonna get around it.
And that code is so unbreakable. Yeah, it's like the greatest code. Like there's a classic story about two mob guys speaking in code, where they were going to, one guy wants a gun because he's going to use on a job, and so Tony is telling Lou, "Hey, Lou, did you get that cake that I wanted?" And Lou goes, "Yeah, I got that cake. It's a great cake. No one will ever know where this cake came from." "Yeah, good. I don't want to, probably not going to want the cake after tomorrow. So can you bring that cake over to my house?" "Yeah, I'll bring the cake over there tonight." "Great. And hey, Lou, can you bring some bullets for the cake?" It's that kind of like they're so transparent with their code talking.
It's so. I worked for the private investigator in Brooklyn who worked on the Pizza Connection trial.
Oh yeah, right.
Down there in Brooklyn, and my cousin, my Irish Catholic cousin, was answering the phone over there. She worked at the pizzeria selling pizza. So we were hearing that. There was one though, because we'd have to go through the transcripts and give our own version of what we were hearing, And one of them was the guys going, "You see that car? That car follows me everywhere. That freaking car. They got to be the feds in that car. Meet me tomorrow at this exact place." He's being wired. Sammy tells her where to meet him the next day.
Right.
Not the brightest guys,
Oh no, sometimes what is it? You're not paranoid if you're actually being followed, and I've seen a couple of those cases too back then.
What about that Margaret Rudin case?
I covered part of that too. That was, I think she's out of jail now.
Oh, really?
I think she's done her time. I believe so. That was another one where, again, hugely circumstantial case, and her initial attorney was a mess.
Yeah.
Amador? Yes.
What a mess that guy was. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions on the guy, but I know that he was having, shall we say, issues at the time. And I think he'd be the first one to admit it. But that was and that was Joe Bonaventure was the judge on that.
Bonaventure, yeah.
Bonaventura, hey,
let's get a meatball sandwich here. Let's take a break. I'm hungry.
People did like his how would you call it, the down to earth mannerisms. There. Oh my God, all this so many.
That was a great time in Vegas, trials. Man.
It really was. It really was. And we were having this, it was that whole time when the old mob, was being
Collado
pushed out.
We were talking about Frank Collado before. He was still around,
right?
Supposedly.
And then Herbie Blitzstein got whacked while I was there. Blitzstein was, Tony Spilatro's right-hand man. And he got whacked by some elements of the Los Angeles mafia. And, or on direction of him, or at the behest of. But he got whacked during that time too. Old fat Herbie Blitzstein.
In that movie, in Casino, that's actually Frank Collado. He's the actor there doing those hits,
right?
With the silencer, yeah.
Right. Frank was like an advisor on them. I know a number of people were in that movie, extras. In fact, there's a cop that comes to the house when De Niro, is having the big fight with his wife, as the character based on Lefty Rosenthal. And I actually know that cop. He actually makes appearances on national TV every now and then as a sort of a police procedures expert. His name's Randy Sutton. He's in that movie. There's another reporter, Glen Castaldi, that I know that's in that movie. Actually got a scene with Robert De Niro. So I know a lot of the people that I worked with.
Yeah, that fellow too with the really flashy dresser. He used to work for the men's clothing stores with those big glasses. Remember that guy?
Oh yeah, I know you.
Jose Banky there,
right.
Robert Mayhew. I think they used his home as for one of their filming locations. Yeah,
probably. Yeah. I met Robert Mayhew.
So did I. Yeah.
Interesting guy.
When I first went to Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, and his firm, the firm that he established,
International, Mayhew International. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's under a different name now, but I think the firm actually still survives.
Oh, really?
And they have like his picture in the lobby. But yeah, very interesting guy. Former CIA, former FBI. Just
Howard
a fascinating guy.
Howard Hughes, too.
Yeah, Howard Hughes, right-hand man, right.
Yeah, they're a
I forgot about
fascinating
that.
guy, yeah. And he died,
crazy.
and his son Peter died, but there's another son living, I think, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. In fact, I don't know if there was all kinds of just craziness that went on there.
Yeah.
Just things that, like I said, I look back now, 20, 30 years later, I go, God, did I really live through that? Did I really cover that? Was I walking downtown and talking to these guys? What? I can't. Sometimes it's hard for me to believe that it really happened, but it did. Real stuff.
I don't know. I'm a little too old for this stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to
I need a
relive it.
slower pace these days.
I enjoyed living it, but I wouldn't want to relive it. Let's put it that way.
That's a young man's game,
But I tell you, I look at the news in Las Vegas, and I think part of the problem now is the news business is different. None of the people in the news are like, my day, you go and you'd be in a city like Las Vegas and you'd stay forever, like I did, 20, 30 years. So you knew everybody. You were very deeply sourced. Today, when I look at the news, it's a bunch of kids, and all they really want to do is get a good-looking resume reel so that they can get a job on a reality show or something. A lot of them don't seem like, and again, part of that's because the pie has been cut into so many different pieces. The money's just not there. We had anchormen, anchorwomen in my day in Las Vegas making, well into six figures. You had people making $250,000, $300,000 a year to read the news. And that ain't happening anymore. The ratings are just not there. So it's a whole different world. And there's, I don't think you get the coverage as deep today in a city like Las Vegas as you did when I was there, where you had, reporters that had been there for many, many years and had, knew all the cops.
Right.
And the cops would talk to you, and, sometimes things would get testy between the reporters and the cops. But, I knew enough guys where, if I was onto something, the guy would say, hey, look, if you hold off 2 days, I'll give you the scoop. And I go, okay, fine. And I did that on a number of occasions, like bad cop stories. They said, look, we want to set this guy up and catch him in the act. If you do a story now, it's going to spoil it. Okay, how long? 2 days? Great. I get the call? Yeah, you get the call. Sure enough, 2 days later, yeah, we just arrested him. He's down there. This is a charge. So we had a really good working relationship in those days. I think the relationship between the police and the media now is very strained.
I tell you, Glen, Meek, you did it to me again, because before we started taping, we were talking for about 20 minutes, and now we've gone overtime. I'm going to have to cut some commercials out. I'm going to send you a bill. I'm going to send you a bill, my friend. Okay? Wrong Numbers, Call Girls, Hackers, and the Mob in Las Vegas. Now, you hear the way the guy tells the story off the top of his head. He wrote this book in 2019, so you got to get the book. Every review of this book talks about how it's such a gripping story. And the rest of the stories you could find on YouTube at Glen A. Meek, M-E-E-K. Hey, Mr. Meek, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Really, it was a pleasure.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.